Now, our very first story, the expected interest to be paid on the energy sector bond has raised some questions about the impact on cost of borrowing in the country. This was after managers agreed to pay 19% as interest on the 7-year bond and 19.5% for the 10-year bond, which would now be closed this Friday. George Rafe has more on this and why managers could not raise the entire amount targeted.
Depending on whom you will engage in the financial space, the views might differ. Whilst some believe that the rate settled on may set a new benchmark rate for borrowing in the country, others disagree. For those who think that it would impact on the cost of credit, they argue that since government sponsored the ESLA PLC bond, interest being paid should be seen as just like any other government paper. So if you should go by the theory that you wouldn't get more better sovereign than your government, then what is being paid on the ESLA bond, which is about 150 basis points higher than the current interest on government's 7-year bond trading on the Ghana Stock Exchange, then that would definitely set a new benchmark. However, others believe that there is no way this rate would impact on the interest of cost of credit in the country. They argue that since the ESLA paper is not a government bond or a strictly corporate bond, there is no way this would impact on the cost of credit over a 7-year period or even 10-year. On the possible reasons for not getting the entire amount, some of the experts that Joy Business have engaged were of the view that the price that was offered was not enough to compensate for the risk associated with the bond that was not fully backed by government. This is because the gap between a 7-year bond and the 10-year bond was just about 0.5%, which some say was not enough. Again, the difference between the 17.5% on the current government yield and this bond showed that investors were asking for more compensation. Managers of the Standard Chartered Bank and Fidelity Bank last Friday managed to raise all the amount targeted in the 7-year bond, but had some challenges in getting all the 3.6 billion cedis targeted 10-year bond, resulting in an extension to this Friday.
And that was a Business Desk report by George Rafe. Meanwhile, economist Professor Godfred Bokwin tells Joy Business the country could have gotten a better rate if the bond was guaranteed by government.
The result is a true reflection of the risk inherent in the bond issue and the overall government strategy to market the bond. And I think that the government's decision not to include the bond issue in the public debt and fully guaranteed by the government might have played a part in the results that we had, and especially with the longer dated maturity of the second one, which is the 10-year bond, that probably increases the risk of investors if you look at our election cycle of just 8 years, and therefore there's greater risk with that one. Once the risk level is high, or once investors perceived the default to be very high, then they will see greater protection from the default risk. And if they are not getting the appropriate compensation for the level of risk that they will be assuming, then obviously they wouldn't want to commit to it the way that we were expecting. But in terms of the decision to issue the bond, I think that we all do agree that is the best way to go, because these arrears, especially from the state-owned enterprises, were actually sort of creating some systemic risk in the financial system, either directly through the balance sheet of banks in terms of the toxic asset created by these arrears, or the BDCs that invariably would also have some implication in the financial system. So the decision to issue the bond and resolve the energy sector indebtedness in the system is certainly something that we all do support. The strategy adopted probably does not reflect a view that I will probably subscribe to, and especially the idea of creating a special purpose vehicle or company to handle it, and government's own decision not to fully back that necessarily increases the risk. And once the risk is higher, investors will demand greater protection from the perceived default risk. And if they are not getting that, they won't commit to it. Of course, there are alternatives. But if you look at the rate guaranteed for the 7-year, I mean, it's still quite high, but probably given the fundamentals of the economy, given the progress of the fiscal consolidation and then other development in the economy, one would say that, well, we can accommodate that higher rate and bite the bullet and solve an issue that is creating some systemic risk in the financial system.
And in a related development, managers of the offer have justified the interest to be paid on the energy bond. They have also downplayed reports that the results demonstrate declining investor interest in the country's bonds. There's more in this report.
The responses were contained in a set of questions and answers sent by managers following enquiries from journalists on the bond results. According to them, the interest expected to be paid on the bond was based on a lot of considerations by sponsor of the bond, that's the Ministry of Finance. This follows reports they could not raise the entire amount because investors were asking for 20% as payable interest on the 10-year bond. But the arrangers of the bond argued the approach to the pricing was reasonable, maintaining that it was important not to overpay. But they were hopeful the yield would reduce over time. On reports that the 10-year bond was not successful because most investors were not comfortable with the security of the ESLA levy being used to settle the bond, Standard Chartered Bank and Fidelity Bank maintained that investors have been adequately protected. They also rejected claims that the results demonstrate declining investor interest in the country's bonds, arguing that the expected interest was not gotten because this is a new type of assets being issued by Ghana. However, most offshore investors only have the mandate to invest in bonds that are guaranteed by government. But they were hopeful that as the bonds perform over time, the required interest would be secured.
Let's now moving away from the bond issue now, and the Dutch ambassador to Ghana, Ron Stricker, is challenging government to do more in reducing its public spending in order to boost the country's revenues. The Netherlands government has been supporting Ghana to improve tax collection, mainly at the large taxpayers' office of Ghana Revenue Authority, GRA. There are concerns government may miss out its revenue targets for the year given the figures recorded so far in the year. Mr. Stricker indicates Ghana could take a cue from the Netherlands in improving the situation. He was speaking at the Championing for Change conference in Kofodia in the Eastern region.
In fact, a country's ability to collect domestic taxes and spend those resources effectively lies at the crux of financing development. They believe that effective collection of revenue can strengthen the social contracts, here it comes again, between citizens, companies and government. Strengthening public investment, the management of public enterprises, good management of public enterprises, social transfer payments and procurement can build confidence in the efficiency of public sector expenditures. This is key to ensuring taxpayers' willingness to support taxation, effective taxation. I would add, from the Dutch perspective certainly, because we have seen now a number of very compelling arguments for good taxation and for having a good tax basis and for having a good tax collection. I would add that on a national scale, taxation, in particular progressive taxation, is a means to combat inequality in society. It is an important instrument for redistribution of wealth. Ghana's domestic revenue GDP ratio has remained far below the standard of its middle-income peers in Africa. It averaged 20.4% between 2012 and 15, and in other sub-Saharan Africa countries, peers, this was 27% for the same period. So there is a difference between the two. I think it's almost 7%. Government.
And on his part, technical advisor to the Commissioner General of the Ghana Revenue Authority, Henry Yintumi, reaffirmed the authority's commitment to implementing measures that will help rake in more revenue.
What
like to assure Mr. Speaker and the Dutch government is that we would undertake to ensure integrity in the use of the resources that they've actually provided to the country. And that one of the key elements of our conversation will be around impact analysis. How does it show? How do we show that we are offering value for money? How do we ensure that we are making the impact in bridging the tax gap? And how do we ensure that we are providing sufficient funds for Ghana beyond aid? So it's something that is high on our list of agenda as well, and it's something that we'll be pursuing. Just touching very briefly on another point he made is the role of top management in change management. And thank you for making the point that this is probably one of the most important subjects for GRA at present, the idea of change. But I'll show that by just giving a short story with regard to how we actually model change. And this is a case in which, this is a true story. One of the change managers in a very reputable bank visited one of the retail offices to tell them about the importance of customer relationship, the importance of ensuring that the offices presented themselves well, both in terms of the staff dress code, in terms of how the office looks. And in the process, he mentioned that the windows of the office were dirty, and so they needed cleaning. That was obviously noted. He came back the following day and realized the windows had not been cleaned. So he came back the third day and the windows have still not been cleaned. I don't know what you would have done. So what he did was to roll up his sleeves, get a bucket of water and clean the windows himself. The result?
It's live on the marketplace. Now moving on, 50% of the phone numbers in the country are registered with false information. This observation was made by the head of the cybercrime unit at the Ghana Police CID, Dr. Gustav Yankson. He revealed that as a result, 90% of mobile money fraud cases reported to his outfit at the police CID headquarters are unresolved. Dr. Jansen believes the only way to remedy the situation is for telecos to perform proper background checks on their agents and gather credible information on customers. He was speaking to Daniel Dazi earlier on News Desk.
It's obvious. I've said it. I don't have the statistics, but I believe that about 50% of that data for SIM registration is false or fake. I strongly believe that. I don't have the statistics anyway, but I mean, looking at the cases that we try to investigate and the kind of names that we tend to see, I mean, it's obvious from the name that this one, I mean, it's not correct. If you can see Kojo, Ajwa, you know, just doesn't make sense. So,
but these people are supposed to register with valid ID cards.
Well, so that is where, as a nation, we need to look at it again. Unfortunately, the truth is that you can do some checks for yourself. Go to Circle today and try to register. They would register you without any card. Or if you send any card there, they will not be able to validate it. So if you can't validate it, then where are the checks? How do you know your customer? Obviously, you don't know your customer. And if you don't know your customer, at the end of the day, should anything go wrong, then the police, we have the responsibility to investigate. And then it makes my work difficult because then I have to use some kind of unconventional, unorthodox methods to investigate. And then that makes it very, very expensive because if you are using other means to investigate, it's no surprising that we are not able to make some kind of inroads with our investigations.
Which is what I wanted to ask, that realistically speaking, are you able to investigate effectively? Because you are looking for a needle in a haystack, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that is the truth. You have hit the nail right on the head. And if currently we are able to investigate just about and prosecute, arrest and prosecute just about 10% of our cases, that isn't too good.
Let's now look at some developments within the downstream petroleum sector. And Group CEO of indigenous oil marketing company GOIL, Patrick Akoli, has appealed to government to quickly pass the local content law to strengthen local businesses in the country. In a speech at GOIL's 2016 Dealers and Trade Area Awards held in Accra, he acknowledged GOIL's lead role and control over the downstream industry and said the company has enough capabilities, experience and technical know-how to increase its market share. Here's more in this report. The awards night by GOIL saw 68 dealers and some stakeholders of the indigenous oil marketing company receive various awards for their distinguished participation and performance over the past year. The dealers were chosen from GOIL stations in the northern, southern, eastern, middle belt and Tema. Group Managing Director of GOIL, Patrick Akoli, in a speech, congratulated all the awardees and outlined the company's commitment to health, safety, security and environmental issues. He also appealed to government to pass a local content law for the downstream petroleum sector.
Management on its part has stepped up spot checks and taken adequate steps to strengthen our monitoring activities. And with the recent purchase of a modern mobile fuel laboratory van to conduct on the spot checks on the quality of fuel at all our service stations. Let me use this opportunity, therefore, to appeal to the government to quickly pass the local content law to strengthen local businesses.
In a keynote address, Deputy Minister of Energy Dr. Mohammed Amin Adam criticized activities of illegal fuel traders, many of who divert fuel stocks bound for export to other neighboring countries. He noted such nefarious activities continue to rid the country of millions of revenue annually.
Smuggling of petroleum products in and out of the country, the discharge of export-bound petroleum products that are bound supposedly for Burkina Faso, for Mali, etc., find their way back into Ghana. And because of this, not only GOIL has been adversely affected, but OMCs in general, to the extent that sales volumes by OMCs decreased by 13% for diesel and 6% for petrol. What it means is that, apart from the fact that your margins are going down, your profitability levels are going down, your income for which you are able to pay your workers goes down. So unemployment is likely to occur if this is not addressed. But on the other hand, government is losing so much money, estimated at about 700 million Ghana cedis annually. How do we lose that money? Because they bring in the products meant for exports. These products do not attract taxes.
The overall winner, who will be going to South Africa with spending money attached, as well as a laptop and certificates, also shared some thoughts.
It's been a surprise to us because though we did very hard, but we didn't know that we were going to win. But by the grace of God, we've won. So I'm very honored, I'm very grateful, and I'm very happy today.
Later in an interview with Joy Business, Dr. Adam commented on what government is doing to prevent a recurrence of the energy sector debts.
The government has announced a number of interventions to address the financial challenges facing our utilities. The energy bond is one initiative, one big initiative that will clean the balance sheet of the utilities and put them back in business, so they can be able to deal with their creditors, they can be able to buy crude oil, they can be able to pay for the gas, which is sold to them both by the West Africa Gas Pipeline and then by Atuabu Ghana Gas. And therefore, if we sanitize their balance sheet, it is important we do not accumulate new debts. This is why government has announced an additional initiative, a measure that we call the cash waterfall system. The cash waterfall system is to ensure that cash flow is not restrained, it's not constrained. Therefore, once ECG makes the collections, there is a formula by which every player in the value chain will have their fair share of the revenue.
GOIL currently controls the marketing sector with 25% of the market share. Now, some players in the rural banking industry are calling on government to engage rural and community banks to ensure the successful implementation of some of its industrialization initiatives. The One District, One Factory, as well as Planting for Food and Jobs policies are expected to revitalize agric to create employment. Love Business Prince Apia spoke to some players in the rural banking sector at the opening of the Abreport Junction branch of the bank in Kumasi.
The One District, One Factory and the Planting for Food and Jobs are expected to revitalize the agricultural sector and create jobs. But some players in the rural banking sector believe the services of rural and community banks cannot be ruled out in the implementation process. One of them is the former CEO of the Minerals Commission and board chairman of Amenfiman Rural Bank, Dr. Tony Orbin. He spoke to Love Business at the opening of the Abreport Junction branch of the bank in Kumasi.
In fact, we were set up to support agriculture, to support the farmers, and we are doing that. We think that even with the Planting for Food and Job, I am sure the best friend would have been rural banks. I mean, sometimes we get hoodwinked by the big boys with bigger elbows, but if you're doing anything on farming, on agriculture, I think the rural bank should be the primary focus, really. I mean, I know some of our colleagues have had problems, but effectively, if you want an institution that deals closely with farmers, small traders, they are the rural banks. And I believe that if government is unsure, they could start with the strong ones, like Amenfiman Rural Bank. You could do pilots with banks such as Amenfiman Rural Bank, which has demonstrated the ability to handle these things.
These concerns are shared by the General Manager for Chumamponia Rural Bank, Noble Issa Mokhtari.
And so when government is bringing the one district, one factory, we will have to sit down with government agencies and see what inputs can we also make. Well, what we are doing is already supporting the government. So if government, we have disbursed a whole lot of monies, government-assisted monies, this program on agric, they are using the rural banks to help disburse those monies. So we are always available to assist government in the development.
Amenfiman Rural Bank is the only rural bank that has branches in 3 different regions, Central, Western and Ashanti. It becomes the second in Kumasi, making a total of 14 branches across the country. Chief Executive Officer of the bank, Dr. Alex Asma, says though the bank has met the minimum capital requirement, it is raking in adequate capital to enhance its risk management initiatives.
And so we are taking risk management very seriously. We are very much aware that we don't use customers' deposits to expand business. We don't use customers' deposits to open branches. We don't use customers' deposits to acquire assets. So as we desire to grow and to reach more people, and as customers see them for our services and call on us to open branches near them, we have to expand our capital and we have to raise new funds from our shareholders. So that is also something that we are seriously working on it to make sure that our capitalization keep improving. Already we have met the capital requirement that has been set for rural banks, but we are not only looking at what Bank of Ghana is setting for us as a requirement, we are looking at for adequate capital to be able to take on the business, to be able to take on the risk as we expand to new areas.
Prince Apia reporting.
And on that note, we wrap up this afternoon's edition of the Marketplace. Many thanks for your company. We bring you some more business developments on Business Live, which happens later in the day. My name is Emmanuel Akwati. You can join me again same time tomorrow for more interesting developments in the world of business. Have a good afternoon.